Doug, BBC Radio.
Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Milo.
Hi there.
Milo.
We did in fact.
Nice to meet you.
There we are.
Sorry.
That's right.
I'm just confirming with the V&A that yes, I can do a piece tomorrow about their design exhibition, which I'm sure is
great.
Brilliant.
Where we have, is it the, it's their costumes in there.
Oh, no, that's the other. This is British Design 1948 to 2012.
Oh, great.
You're right, there is a costume exhibition coming up. Oh, that's another one I've got to do. Anyway.
So busy.
Busy is good, yes, I'm sure you would agree.
Exactly.
Can I start by retailing a question from before, but I'm going to ask the same thing again. One of the obvious things about Potter is you were dealing with the main performers between roughly, say, 11 and 20, something like that. So they grow up, Emma becomes a beautiful young woman, and the guys become handsome young guys. So they become attractive. But that's not at all what Potter is about, because they have to remain sort of childlike or on the cusp of childlikeness. Was that a problem? And I'm thinking in terms of cinematography, design, costume design, everything.
We were just talking about it earlier, actually, about Emma particularly, because she didn't have from the second film onwards, like the big bushy hair and the buck teeth and whatever the books described. But she always played, she embodied the character of Hermione so strongly that, she was a very beautiful young girl. You couldn't make her look ugly or plain or ordinary because she wasn't. And she was very conscious of fashion as she was growing up, and conscious that other people were conscious of fashion, I think. But even though she wasn't exactly the Hermione described in the book, she was the Hermione described in the book. So
I don't think we did anything.
No, I don't think we did really.
We didn't do anything in terms of lighting or in terms of costume to make them look any different to how they were. I mean, there was, except of course Rupert looking like someone completely different in the eighth film.
There must have been, again, sorry, repeating it, but a kind of reflux effect that J.K., it would only be human that she must have been at some point, say by halfway through, kind of influenced by what she was seeing on the screen.
Absolutely not. I mean, she's answered that question many times. She was not influenced at all by what happened. She knew what was going to happen in these, in her books.
Before she ever met the cast.
But even the nuances of character?
Yes, she did it. The nuance of character were not... I mean, most certainly there was a process of discovery, I'm sure, in each of the books, but it wasn't influenced by Dan, Rupert or Emma, or seeing what we saw, what we created. I mean, there was a time, I know, when she was writing the seventh book, when she came onto the set and saw the Ministry of Magic, and she said that was a somewhat surreal experience, because there she was writing about it, something, and there it was before her. And she was always incredibly supportive and loved the sets that Stuart built and loved what we did with the films. She was incredibly supportive, but never once, I don't think, was affected by what we were doing. She, the two are quite separate, and she always had a very clear sense of what was hers and what she was going to do.
Have you seen the tour yet, and what do you think of the tour, if you have?
I think the tour is fantastic, and it's it fills us, I suppose, with great pride. Who would have thought? Certainly, when I optioned a book in 1997, that 15 years later there'd be a tour. I mean, come on! I don't think I have. I certainly have never, and don't think I ever will again make a film which has a tour or a theme park or any of this. So you walk around and. It's very exciting. It's quite moving. It's thrilling, and it's a reminder, not the one that I really or David really needs reminding, but of just the quality and the detail of the work done and the passion, the care of everybody working on these films to make them what they are.
It's not surprising. It's rewarding, I think. Actually, because we were involved with the planning of the tour, and so. There's nothing in it that we didn't know about in advance, but actually it's just really rewarding to see it all in its splendour and detail, and this testament to the quality of the craftsmen and craftswomen, craftspersons that put it together. So
I suppose we walk onto each set, each prop is filled with memories of times had, and so walking through this tour is like a trip down memory lane. So, those memories are good memories. So it's a real pleasure to be here. It's weird to see it so formalized, you know,
Yes,
as a visitor attraction, as the term goes. But it's really lovely too, and that's wonderful to also to know that we'll be sharing it in a way with people, and that the audiences will be able to see the level of detail that went on that was then the extent, or the level of detail and the extent to which the artist went to create this world. Because when you see the films, you get a sense of it, but you most certainly don't see the level of it. You know, as David, you look at it, as David was talking about in the press conference. There's a table where just a regular school table, and there's the artwork gone and scratched out a broom and a little bird. You know, I mean.
Actually, also what's interesting with that was some of the crowd, the kids, the school kids who played the Hogwarts kids, they actually used to do it themselves, and instead of being discouraged, as you would be normally if you're on a film set and started to scratch into the furniture, they were encouraged because
discouraged.
It was characterful. It was proper character behaviour, not character-driven behaviour.
So not only is the series one of the highest grossing in the world, it's also probably had one of the largest budgets compared to other children's films. So what was it like to have that much in terms of resources, not only financially, but also in terms of the support you got from Warner Brothers? Did it give you a lot of freedom when making the films?
Well, they gave us freedom in many ways and support. They were incredibly
pretty much in every
hands-off.
way. Yeah.
I mean, it's shocking when the level of the films, the budgets, and also the significance of the film to their business, that they left us alone to make the films in the way they did, and were there as support when we needed it. They gave us a lot of money, but as with any film, your ambition always exceeds the budget that you have, and so we inevitably had to make compromises. Sometimes those compromises led to some of the best, some really great creative things, and that's really that's great. And I think it's important to remember that it's good. A lot of the good decisions came from not having quite.
Can you think of any examples of that where actually having to improvise?
Well, for example, on the third film, we didn't have in the scene in the Gryffindor common room when they're eating the sweets and turning into animals. Originally, we thought about doing that as a visual effect, where each of the actors would morph into a lion or whatever, and that would have been fun. But actually, to see the actor going and seeing their face as they do it is much more involving and much more amusing.
It became a character-driven moment, really, rather than just a divorced visual effects.
We just couldn't afford to do the visual effects at that level; it'd been too expensive. So, but I think it was better what Alfonso came up with.
And you're also working with Alfonso on Gravity. I think you produced it. So what was it like? Obviously, it's a very, very different kind of project. So what was it like interacting with him on that? And what do you think of the film? As obviously,
it's early days, but I think Alfonso's one of those filmmakers. He's a great filmmaker. So it feels it's a privilege to be working with him, and I think that Gravity is going to be unique and thrilling, and moving, and everything you'd expect from an Alfonso Cuarón film. And he's a great director, and so I'm having a great time.
Are you now both out of the returnable family franchise game? Have you said, like, I've given 12 years of my life to that, I'm now going to do one-off movies? Or are you still, whether jointly or separately, still looking?
It's all about material, really, and if it's the right material, it can be a single film or a returnable franchise. Well, we don't like to call it a franchise, it's a series of films, returnable series of films. But it's all about the material, really.
But a parcel still turning up from publishers and agents, and indeed writers, saying, hey, this is your new Potter.
Well, it's a holy grail. I mean, we'd all like to find the new Potter, as well as that lovely little individual romantic drama that is sitting on the shelf somewhere. But I certainly wouldn't have any qualms about doing another one if such a thing were to come along. But lightning doesn't strike twice.
For me, when I read the first book, I had no idea that there would be 8 films. It was a book I liked, I thought it might be a nice, modestly sized British film. I didn't have a clue. So I just liked it. And I think that's the only approach one can take to material. I don't want to find the next Potter. Actually, I don't want to find the next Potter, because the next Potter doesn't exist. One wants to find something that is true to itself. I don't think Hunger Games is the next Potter or the next Twilight. It's a phenomenon, but it's not the same as either one of those series. So,
and also, having made Potter, you wouldn't really want to make Potter again.
I wouldn't make it. It wouldn't be true. And I think that things that try to be the next are never as good as the original. And so for me, I'm like you, looking for the next film that touches me in some way. I connected with Harry, Ron, and Hermione. I connected with Harry, Ron, and Hermione. I knew people like them. I'd been to a school like Hogwarts without magic. This was a world I related to in some way or other. And that's ultimately what draws me, and what I imagine draws David to materials, things that you have some sort of stories that you have some sort of connection to, not necessarily the thought, this is the next big thing.
So when the series did become as popular and as it did it affect the way that you approached the films at all, or did you just always think of them as, that one little
Absolutely
book?
Not. It's a very fair question. No, we approached each film as an individual film, and everybody working on the film was incredibly ambitious for that film, determined to make each film better than what became the film.
Our job always was just to make the very best filmic version we were capable of Joe's books, and someone else might have made a better job, who knows, but all we could do was get up every day and say, this is what we have to do, how can we do it the best?
Even the last two, because you said, they're individuals, but the last two were of the same book. And
they're very different films, though. I mean, one was, the 7-part one was the first film that
was
we
a European road movie.
Yeah, it was. We didn't go to Hogwarts, and it was a bit of a European road movie.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the second one was the culmination of everything that had come before it. So I think even those two halves of one book, they were very different films.
Yeah.
And again, I suppose the last one was slightly different because there was an awareness that you were bringing it to a conclusion, and that most certainly was in our minds. But all we were doing was making the best conclusion that we could. That was all. I mean, it wasn't a sense of anything beyond that, because otherwise I think you get lost.
But when the series got darker, pardon the cliche, I know people always use that adjective, but got darker around part 3, that was because you sat round with other important people and decided it should, or it was just an organic thing?
Organic, based on Joe's material and based on the director Alfonso Cuarón's approach to the material. It was as simple as that. They're becoming teenagers. When you're 13 years old, becoming a teenager, you have different interests, different concerns. It's more complicated than when you are 11 years old, and I think that reflects in the nature of the filmmaking. And
I think the first two films, actually, Chris Columbus is a real sort of unsung hero, because they were much more children's films, I think, because even though it was the beginning touching on all these universal themes and whatever, you were dealing with literally kids. Chris had to re-record most of their sound on the first two films because he had to talk them through while the camera was running. Eyes wide, you're terrified.
Chin up, stop laughing, stop laughing.
And so they were very, very different films. By the time they were 12, 13, 14, they were beginning to be capable of giving very different performances of their own. And the books were also growing up. They were adolescents in the books, and it demanded a different kind of approach. So
and actually, Alfonso benefited from the 2 years they'd had working with Chris, and Mike benefited from Alfonso and Chris, and David benefited from all that had come before him. So, the stories themselves became darker. That's a natural evolution. If you look at the books, that's what happens.
Also, the kids they stopped being kids, and they had life. They started to have life experiences, which in the gaps in between, and sometimes during the making of the films, I'm sure. But they began to have life experiences that they could then translate back into performance, into character, and just approach things from a sort of more grown-up, more informed manner. And it was all organic. That was the books. That happened in the books, and it just happened in real life too. And so each one fed into the other.
So would you consider Alfonso Cuarón's film the sort of turning point of the series? Because David Yates says it's actually his favourite film in the series. So, and it really is the point where it gets darker. So would you call that a turning point from the more like Charles films?
I think it is a turning point, and in many ways, I think it's a turning point. And you know, Chris Columbus really helped support that that shift. But yes, absolutely, you know, everything changed with Alfonso in some way. The costumes even changed. It was a subtle change, but they changed. I mean, you know, every single uniform we remade, which was quite
contentious.
Quite contentious. but you know, it actually wasn't. But it was just because it was changes. But it was just a tiny bit to the right, to the left. And I think Alfonso's shift really helped the series evolve and allow us to make as many films as we did, allowed us to go to the very end.
So it was more like bridging the gap between the light-hearted and the dark. It was more not a massive shift, but a bridge between.
Absolutely,
it was. Yeah.
And yet Alfonso was the first to acknowledge that he couldn't have done what he did without Chris Columbus. So these things happen for a reason. It's not like it was a grand master plan. It happened, but it worked out.
Do you know what Warner's plan to do in terms of re-release? I know we're not quite at that point yet, but we're not that far away from it. Is it going to be like Disney, where the really big hits are re-released every 7 years or something?
I have no idea.
Don't know.
No, I have no idea. You can ask them that. I don't know. And again, honestly, the most important thing for us was making the films the way we did, the way we did, and what Warner's ultimately do with re-releases and ultimate collector editions and super ultimate collector editions and super. It's not something that we have a control over, and ultimately what we do is support in terms of just providing the materials and ideas and looking at the materials they generate.
So kind of related to that, there's actually supposedly the final big DVD release of all 8 films coming out this year. Do you think there's going to be lots of new material released on that?
Yes, there will.
Yeah, there will be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there'll also be a lot of things included with it. There'll be bumper. You'll be able to get extra props or whatever it is that go with it. Yes, there will be a lot of new material. This was an incredibly well documented film series.
It was.
We had 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 film crews around from the DVD department, we had a documentary team. We had, there were different stages. There were a lot of people working to document this.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have you looked around?
Yes, we have.
Like
It was we were taking on sort of the mini
Yeah,
tour.
we had a mini tour,
We were
just
rushed
like the half an hour.
But yeah, it was very exciting. It was amazing, the detail.
Well, the other thing is, of course, we saw it without kids.
Yeah.
Well, okay, there were 2 kids on the tour, but
Yeah.
actually, you
And their
really
faces
need
were hilarious.
No,
as well.
we went back last year in November to Orlando there was a big
Yeah.
DVD launch in Orlando, and we again been involved with the planning of the theme park from the beginning, and we'd seen it part way through its construction, and we've worked with them on the visual effects for it and whatever, and we'd been there for the big opening.
Yeah.
But to be there when it was open and full of
course,
of people who were actually seeing it for the first time and really enjoying it,
That sense
just
of
gives you
wonder.
such a.
this is a bit like a
buzz.
cinema without an audience.
It is a
okay?
bit, yeah,
That's
absolutely.
inevitable.
Yeah. But once they get in there, I think the response will be magnificent.
Thanks for being
Thank you.
All
Great.
right, thanks a lot.
Nice to meet
See you.
See you.